Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Further Comments. Damien, welcome.
So excited to be here with you as always, Horace. I'm also really excited about having two very smart people doing cool things. You want to introduce them?
Yeah, so today we've got Joe Green and Stephanie Goutos from Gunderson joining us. Now, for those who don't know Gunderson, why don't you know about Gunderson?
You should.
It is possibly one of the most tech-forward law firms in the US. Joe and Stephanie have been doing incredible things, so we are going to be interviewing them today to find out more about what they've done and, more importantly, what lessons we can take away to apply to our own work. So it's going to be a no-holds-barred conversation. I've already warned them that I'm going to be extremely rude. And so, Joe, Stephanie, welcome.
It's totally your brand, Horace. We're fully expecting that.
That's right.
Thank you for having us. We're ready.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I'm a litigator, so treat this like a deposition. I'm going to be asking you the hard-hitting questions.
Objection.
Okay. Not yet, Joe. Save it.
So a quick aside, when I was litigating in Boston and somebody literally pounded the table saying, I will not have my client answer these questions. He was like 70 years old. I was a 25-year-old guy, right? So he was clearly just trying to beat me over the head. And he said, I'm going to get on the phone with Judge so-and-so and tell them all the crap you're trying to pull. And I said, Judge so-and-so isn't presiding over this. And by the way, Judge so-and-so that you're going to call is a Boston judge, and we're in Minnesota. So that Boston, he's like, I don't care. I'm going to call Judge so-and-so. Anyways, deposition hijinks you will not see today.
Well, Stephanie will hopefully have some litigator war stories to be able to contribute. I unfortunately do not. Stephanie litigated for years.
Yeah, I'm a recovering class action litigator. I did at Jackson Lewis for 8 years. And yeah, so I have had some interesting deposition moments as well.
Sure. I was also a class action litigator, maybe on the other side of your side. So
did you do plaintiff?
I did both. I did both. So which was a lot of fun.
Interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often. But yeah, so in Jackson Lewis, 50 state surveys for all sorts of employment-y thing. That must have been a joy.
Yeah, I still have nightmares when I hear 50 state survey of anything, just because of the large volume of state surveys we had.
Yeah, and those surveys are obsolete as soon as the ink is dry and you have to run them again.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's so much easier in Australia. There's only like 6 states and 2 territories.
Oh, man, you have it good.
Wow. That sounds amazing.
And some of those states are filled almost entirely with wallabies.
But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're not here to talk about kangaroos and wallabies. We're here to talk about AI and technology and how law firms can leverage AI to do better. Joe, Stephanie, tell us about what you guys are using today and what you're most excited about. And I want to then take us back to prehistory, pre-large language models.
A full 3+ years ago.
It's a rich history, but yeah, history. Joe, take it away.
We started our journey pretty early, but we've really come, I think, quite a long way. And Stephanie and I were talking about this a little bit earlier this year. We felt like this was the year that we kind of broke the back on mainstream adoption internally. Still a long way to go. Still a lot of, now we have solutions that are leveraging LLMs in a whole bunch of different facets of our business and practice, solving a whole bunch of different problems. It seems every day another tool that we were using, either there's a generative AI replacement or a generative AI feature that we can turn on and start using. And most importantly, from our user base, I think our lawyers, our business professionals, they're really starting to integrate it behaviorally into the way that they work, which has taken some time.
Yeah. I'm still waiting to work less hours. I was promised that with all these tools, I would work less. And I feel as though I'm actually working more. And I've heard this from others because in addition to my day-to-day duties, I'm also upskilling and trying to learn all these tools as they rapidly come out. So it's been an exciting time.
We are all running fast because Silicon Valley is running fast and they're building the new things that are getting integrated with the tech folks that is being implemented in law firms. So I think, yes, running fast to what Joe and Stephanie said. Thing number 2, I think, Stephanie, I'm doing more work kind of relates to Jevons paradox. Is that, as you shrink the unit cost of any particular work, all of a sudden now you can do more of those works. In the old world, I would have just done 1 memo, but now Jevons paradox, I do 10 memos.
Right.
The thing number 3 is that we kind of have all sorts of low-hanging fruit. I have like 100 things on my backlog that we could do. What do I do? And with Jevons paradox, I could do a lot of those 100, right? So I think between those 3, Silicon Valley running fast, Jevons paradox saying we can do more, and all of the low-hanging fruit that we can do as a law firm and as an industry, I think that's what's making everybody overwhelmed.
Well, there's no slow time of the year in the innovation world. It's just
that's right.
Always many things to do, not enough hours in the day.
But let's take us back to the beginning. We're looking at this world now where there are lots of people using these tools, and that's amazing. And we'll come back to that once we finish exploring the history. But do you guys remember what you were doing when ChatGPT was first released in November 2022 and your reaction and what you expected the impact to be on legal?
I probably learned about it from Stephanie, so she should get the first crack at this one.
No, I do remember it because it was such like a holy crap moment for me as a knowledge worker, and seeing what it could do. And like, it could teach you how to speak like a pirate, but it could also crunch your data, but it could also draft talking points. I mean, it was truly incredible. And I knew that I had to learn everything about it. So I started taking a lot of like the Google and the Microsoft courses on AI over 2023 and 2024, and just trying to immerse myself in the whole AI ecosystem.
You know, it's funny. I don't have a firm memory. I honestly can't remember when I first heard about ChatGPT. We had a colleague at the time, John Scordato, who you both know quite well, and who built our ChatGD application, which we'll talk more about at some point. He had been talking to me about large language models and prompt engineering and things like that. And we had been working with some large language model powered tools before ChatGPT came out. So I was familiar with the technology. The chat interface was not something that I immediately dove into and kind of never came out of. I think Stephanie was hooked
I'm still there.
pretty instantly.
Still
and
there.
still is. You know, I had more of a kind of a gradual incorporation of it, which I think helps me kind of understand where a lot of our users are, even after seeing the power of it and seeing what it could do. It took me a while actually before I really started kind of like finding ways to really integrate it into my personal life, into my work life.
And poor Joe, I would pepper him with Teams messages all the time of like, this is a dashboard I built, or this is like a site or something. And Joe's like, what is this related to? Well, nothing, but it will be something. You know, it just added to the list, I think, of all the
in many ways,
going
Stephanie
on.
saved me all the time of me having to figure out all the things that it could do, because Stephanie was just giving me the live reports of every new
TLDR.
development. Yeah.
I'm
Exactly.
going to build on what Stephanie and Joe were just talking about, and I'm going to integrate it with my God moment down at my kitchen table when I started using ChatGPT in November around Thanksgiving. And my wife will tell you that I said, my God, this changes everything. Like I had worked at Thomson Reuters. I said stuff that would take years. Now I can be able to build in seconds. You know, most of our lawyers that work in our firms think about what is. That is, what is ChatGPT today? Yeah. But Stephanie, Joe, Horace, and I think about what could be. What could you build with these things? And I think that what is versus what could be is a distinction between product people and consumers of the products.
I'll share a story. So this morning I was looking in the fridge, and I promise this is relevant. This morning I was looking in the fridge, and I saw this box of basil, and I'm like, well, what am I going to do with basil? And my wife, who was sitting about maybe 5 meters behind me, I said, hey, what can we cook with lamb chops and basil? And she didn't respond. And I was like, hey? And she goes, oh, you're talking to me. You had your ChatGPT voice. And she thought I was talking to ChatGPT on my phone.
Oh my
And
gosh.
to get to this point in time, I think it's incredible.
I was just going to build upon that. Your wife thought you were talking about ChatGPT. I thought you were talking about basil, a human. We pronounce it basil in our side. For the listeners that don't know what a basil is, I think he's talking about basil.
Potato, right?
It's true. Yeah. Let's call the whole thing out.
Back when ChatGPT first came out, we had actually, at our company, been working with GPT-2 for a little while. We were building for an Australian company a annual report writing tool that as you're typing, it would suggest the next sentence for you. And it would pull from a database of like prehistory going like, these are examples of sentences that were used in other reports, etc. So it was really good at predicting the next line. But in the GPT-2 style workflow and that level of technology. So when ChatGPT came out, our reaction was, what, there goes 18 months of work? and everything just shifted. And I think like it's been accelerating ever since then. So you guys were one of the first ones to launch an internal chatbot. Joe, you mentioned earlier, ChatGD.
Yep.
What was the journey of doing that?
Yeah. So ChatGPT came out in November of 22?
22.
And then GPT-4 came out in March, April 23. That's when K6 and Harvey launched. The leap from GPT 3.5 to GPT 4 and the capabilities and the speed of that transition, that was a real buckle up moment for everybody. And then seeing companies coming out in the legal space, and also companies making such a splash coming out of the legal space who already had access to it and had already productized it for legal, created a real sense of urgency beyond playing with ChatGPT and imagining the possibilities. We looked at the products available on the market. There were conversations internally, particularly coming from our risk department, about whether we should be banning ChatGPT for use, having anything to do with working with the firm. We, around the same time, overcame that hurdle and as a firm decided we were going to have guardrails and training, but we were going to allow people to use these tools in the same way that our attorneys use Google and know not to put confidential information into Google. John Scronato, our head of legal engineering at the time, had been playing around with this stuff going way, way back to Bert and Roberta. And he sort of had this idea, like, I've been playing with the open source tech stack that a lot of it seems like our clients are building these types of wrappers on, not just a wrapper for chat, but also doing retrieval augmented generation, which at the time, ChatGPT
No one was
wasn't
doing.
RAG.
Yeah.
There wasn't no RAG in ChatGPT. So he had sort of seen with Llama Index and LangChain and, that kind of like it was very emerging tech stack at the time, that he could put something together that we were like, oh, I'm sure it's not going to be as good as what Harvey's building with all of their engineers or Casetext with their early access, but maybe it'll give us a tool that would allow us to do what we felt like we needed to do, which was get something in the hands of our attorneys that was more secure, that they could use actual client information and that we'd be comfortable with that. Start giving them exposure to this technology and experience with how to use it effectively, what it does, what it doesn't do, not magic. It messes things up all the time, especially at that time. But the combination of being able to provide enterprise ChatGPT access before enterprise ChatGPT was a thing, with RAG, which also didn't exist in ChatGPT that was available at the time, and to be able to provide that to lawyers at the scale of our entire firm. We actually rolled it out to everybody, including our business professionals, in August of 23 after beta testing it over the summer of 23. So it was built very quickly, very cheaply. We only really replaced it earlier this year. I mean, we had been using it for a year and a half as kind of our internal solution. It gave us a huge leg up in terms of getting our people familiar with what LLMs are and what they do and how to get useful things out of them.
I have to add my 2 cents on all this. I think that the way that ChatGD was rolled out was brilliant, honestly, and not just because I'm at the firm, but I think it was too early to use some of the more mature tools, and people just didn't even know what to do with it at the time. And so our goals were really just like, here's where you can experiment in this safe playground area where everything is going to be secure and confidential. You can learn what it can do well, what it can't. And then to even get access, we had everyone attend a firm-wide training, and they had to agree to our policy before you could even log in. So we were very, very transparent, and we were communicating and saying, like, this is not a perfect tool. We want you to actually experiment and give us your feedback, and we want to learn from this. So I think that was the smart way to frame it, for sure.
That really relates to your clients, our startups. Really, in startups, you have the agile methodology that you build quickly. You don't build a car. You rather build a skateboard that turns into a bicycle, turns into a motorcycle that turns into the car. Yeah. And if you're just building a skateboard, you can swap out that skateboard quite quickly. So I was going to ask...
You don't tell people that the skateboard is going to go 100 miles an hour or 0 to 60 in 1 second, right? Like, I mean, expectations and framing, I think, defined a lot of success versus not success in the early days of generative AI. And I think that's probably still the case.
That's right, because John just made a skateboard. He's not spending $1 million. He just built a skateboard. Oh, and now that skateboard turned into a bicycle, right? I was going to ask you whether you've had to throw away work. You already answered that question, that you went from BERT to GPT-2 to GPT-4, and you could just swap out the skateboards as you need it. The question that I have then is, throwing away work maybe less painful these days? That Horace said, we had, there goes the last year, but maybe it's less painful because I can swap it out so quickly. And maybe that vibe coding aspect of it, that I could just vibe code it out and get it out the door, I wonder if that's going to spill over to legal work. If I spent as an associate a week working on this brief, there's a lot of pride of authorship there. Then if somebody wants to change my beautiful words, I have a lot of anger. And so this is a lot of sunk cost fallacy that maybe goes away. That maybe if the document doesn't take a week to build, but maybe spends, like, I vibe coded this brief and then somebody else wants to change the brief, cool, because I didn't spend that much time on it. So I wonder if this idea of sunk cost fallacy may be going away a little bit in favor of agile and vibe coding. Is that something both for legal work substantively and tooling that the firms build?
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure, right? I think that in our line of work and in technology in general, you can't get too attached to the things you build. If you do, eventually you're going to get real stuck. In many ways, our goal is to replace the things that we do with something better as soon as something better comes along and makes sense in all the ways that it needs to make sense economically and, from a change management and kind of change capital perspective. There are a lot of considerations. I try not to get too attached to anything that we do or build, because at the end of the day, everything's evolving. Everything's evolving now. So
everything.
We're tending to take very short-term views of, like, what makes sense for us today, what makes sense for us in light of kind of the other choices that we've made, and how do we keep ourselves as open to possibilities and change as possible. And to try to encourage everyone that we work with within the firm to take that kind of view too, which is easier for us because our lawyers work with startups. Startups fail. Then you got to start doing something else, right? And I think increasingly anybody who is alive today who uses technology in any capacity sees that happen, right? Like, oh, that UI that I was using yesterday, they totally overhauled it and they changed it. That's how SaaS works, right? You didn't have to buy a new version all of a sudden tomorrow. It's different than it was today, or that product doesn't exist anymore. And now you got to migrate onto something else. But Damien, I totally agree with you that the idea that the easier it is to put something out, the less pride of authorship and attachment that you have time to give it.
So I wonder if the reason you're so innovative, or one of the reasons, of course, is because Joe Green and Stephanie are brilliant. But I would guess that another is that you see startup clients all the time. And maybe you either get pressure from your startup clients to be able to do work better, faster, stronger, or put more optimistically, that your lawyers see inspiration from their clients saying, oh, all of our clients are using these really cool tools. Maybe we can do these really cool tools too, to be able to integrate them in the work. So I guess the question, since you work mostly with startups, are you seeing pressure and inspiration, a combination of those?
I mean, I'm just inspired constantly by our clients. I think like the stuff that they can do is ridiculously awesome. And I love being able to have a seat at the table, seeing all this happening and advising and helping them, because it is a very exciting time. So I do find it inspirational.
Yeah.
Do your lawyers also?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, listen, our lawyers all to some degree could have worked at any other law firms, right? In many different areas. None of our practices are so unique just to tech companies that like it's the only place that you could do it. Even our commercial transactions lawyers, there's lots of other jobs that they could have. They self-selected in many cases because they find this area interesting and they find these companies interesting and they like working with early stage companies and founders who are pursuing these big visions and being along for the ride, being able to help in all the ways that we can. And so, yeah, I think that does rub off to some degree.
You've talked about a lot of benefits that Gunderson people have. One of the benefits is that they get to work with people like you that have a DuckDuckGo t-shirt on. Do you want to explain how awesome DuckDuckGo is and how all of our listeners should use DuckDuckGo?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a perfect example, right? I lateraled to Gunderson in 2011 from Simpson because I was interested in working with earlier stage companies, smaller companies, and in tech. One of the early companies that I worked with when I came to Gunderson as a lawyer was DuckDuckGo. I was their lawyer. So DuckDuckGo is a search engine that competes with Google and Bing and all the other big search engines, but has always had kind of out of the gate very significant privacy focus. So not taking your information and using it to serve ads and or selling it to other places across the internet. So you search on DuckDuckGo and your search results don't follow you around the internet in weird and creepy ways like it does in some other cases.
We're not sponsored. We just love our clients.
Right.
So I should have worn my swag that I got. I just got
a board meeting in 2012.
I should have worn my comment hoodie that I just got.
Stephanie just got a bunch of Perplexity swag.
Oh, I love Perplexity. Perplexity is now my go-to if I want facts in the world.
Same. I love it so much. And in fact, I knew that I was going to be hit when my mom loved it because my mom, she needs help sometimes like logging into her Instagram and like she loves Perplexity. And I just think it's so user-friendly. And it became quickly one of my favorite tools.
A lot of law firms have said that they're using Perplexity. If they want legal research, they use one tool. But if they want, facts about the world, Perplexity is their go-to. How's Gunderson thinking about facts in the world?
Yeah. So Stephanie actually became a Perplexity Enterprise Business Fellow. She's been giving them feedback on product for some time now. And earlier this year in maybe May, we got full access for the whole firm. It's very well liked. It's a very popular tool. Honestly, for me, that was more my gateway drug. I mean, I use ChatGD and but like I said, I wasn't necessarily incorporating it into my daily behavior in the way that I saw Stephanie and, some other people doing. Perplexity for me was like when the straw broke my back, I basically just use it as a Google replacement. Any information or answers that I want from the internet, facts, things like that. What does the internet have to say about this? I use Perplexity.
And Stephanie had a really good throwaway comment that we should now delve into is and delving is a very good word that is in ChatGPT. But we should talk about Comet. A lot of our listeners won't know what Comet is, but I do and you do. Maybe you could talk a little bit how the browser Comet maybe could shape things in the way that Chrome maybe shapes search.
Yeah, I would love to talk about Comet. That's actually what the hoodie is. It is a limited edition Comet Perplexity hoodie, which I was very excited to get. I think it has rolled out to Max users right now and some pro users. I don't know if everyone has it yet. Do you have it?
I've got it.
Damien?
Yep, I've got it. I've not yet kicked the tires of it too much, but I've access, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to change the entire way that we work, and I don't say that lightly. I'm so used to it now that if I actually go out and use a different browser that doesn't have the assistant in the right-hand corner, I'm a little disoriented. Like, wait, you have to go to an external LLM and ask your question. Like, so rough.
Like a Neanderthal.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, what a first world problem. But you do get used to it. I mean, I have used it the first weekend that I got access to it, and I was like glued to it. My kids are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I have a new agentic browser. Like, it's everything. So I had it grocery shop for me, and I asked it for a specific recipe, and I didn't have to look up the recipe. It put everything in my cart. I hit refresh and it checked out. I was like, this is amazing. I mean, this is a game changer. I went on retail sites and I compared prices, and it really just is an agent to just right with you, like doing everything that you're doing. So I think it's going to change the way everyone works.
Let's relate this now to the law. Imagine if you had a legal tool that had that right-hand side browser to be able to build all the things you need to build. Is there an analogy between Comet as a browser doing all the things and the tools we're going to use as lawyers and clients that might use without lawyers?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is sort of the journey that I think we've been on. We started with this chat interface with an amazingly powerful LLM for the time and gave us kind of remarkably new capabilities, but also was nowhere near up to the tasks that people immediately started asking it to do. And that's where you got crazy hallucinations and just total fails and things that, is like, why did you ask an LLM to do that? It's just not built to do that. It's never going to be able to do that just like out of the box, without significant engineering around it. So we sort of like gave that to people and said, here you go. The world's your oyster. Whatever you could dream up, ask it to do. They got disillusioned. It didn't quite work. Some people became prompt engineers to try to figure out how to like trick it into doing the things that they wanted it to do. Now I think we're sort of in the tool building phase. And this is the approach that we've taken with some of the things that we're building in Perplexity and a lot of the things that we're building in Deep Judge. We launched Deep Judge firm-wide right before Perplexity, so in April of this year. And we've built a whole bunch of, we rebuilt ChatGD in Deep Judge, and we created different versions of it with different personas. So we created one for lawyers, one for business professionals, one for our marketing team. But then we created a whole bunch of additional, far more point solution type workflows, some of which require no prompting at all. Upload a document, it'll summarize it for you, right? Like zero friction, no need to learn how to do it. But as we do that, as we build out all of these different tools and capabilities, as you look at things like Comment, that the place that we're going to move to is then eventually sticking that chatbot right back on top of it as an agent that can use all of these different tools where the engineering work has been done for specific use cases. And most importantly, the users will then have an understanding because they've been using those tools individually. They'll know, oh, I know what these tools do. It can do this, it can do this. I've done all those things. Now I just don't have to go to different tiles. I can just ask it to do it and it'll actually work. I think that's the journey.
It has a new name now. I don't know if Joe, you want to announce what the name is? ChatGD
Plus.
Okay, so if you guys like the name, I came up with it. If you don't like it, it was Joe's idea. Yeah, that's our new and improved version, just to distinguish between the original ChatGD.
Yeah.
We kind of do see this evolution of eventually people would say, no, I don't want to remember who to use or which of these personas to use. Just go and funnel it to the right decision, like a decision tree approach to it. It's interesting because I think more and more the value of these tools is becoming in the integrations that you have rather than simply the analogy I've been using is like every one of these large language models that people are tapping into is like a diamond, but the people who are selling this are the ones doing the polishing. So depending on how well you polish it, the value of that diamond is going to be different. Back to the point, eventually what we're going to get to, I think, is you have all of these different people selling different jewels, but nobody knows which jewel is the best. So you're going to have an agent determining which jewel to use in a certain context. So in your journey right now, Joe and Stephanie, where are you up to and what do you think is going to be the biggest hurdle to get to the next stage?
It's funny. I feel like the evolution of legal tech long before generative AI has gone from death by 1,000 point solutions to death by 1,000 platforms. And now maybe we're headed to death by 1,000 agents that are also not interoperable or can communicate with each other.
If only there were a legal data standard that could be able to allow that interoperability.
That would be so helpful.
We've made it a long time without Sally coming up. I have to say, I'm impressed.
And Folio, which Joe and I are both board members of Folio, of the Leah Institute, which is overseeing Folio.
That's right. That's exactly the point. And I think that is ultimately where we're headed. There's this proliferation of capabilities, whether it's different tools within even a single platform or a single product, but there's a whole bunch of different modules that require context switching and understanding what to use for what use case. And if it's not in a single platform, then you've got multiple platforms and those platforms don't speak to each other. So this hard work of sort of like integration between platforms. And then also, I think eventually creating more of some kind of more unified UI and user experience in terms of how they navigate their day-to-day work without having to do all of this context switching and remembering what to use. Those are the things that we struggle with the most at this point because we built a lot. We have a lot of stuff and lawyers are busy. they're not getting a PhD in how to use all the things that we provided to them. And that's the challenge that I think, we have to figure out how to navigate.
I think it's also, though, there's not a one size fits all. Like, I think one of my favorite questions that I'll get from a vendor is like, how are your lawyers using AI? And it's like, well, how much time do you have? Because there's just such a difference between even lawyers at a transactional firm versus a litigation firm. And then you have to drill down to the practice group level. And then you're going to have individual, preferences based on the partners that you're working with, based on what the clients might want, the industry. I mean, it's so nuanced that it's very challenging to just answer, high level, how are lawyers using AI?
I love all that. We have this beautiful blank box called ChatGPT. I can do anything with ChatGPT. That's an omnibox, right? But because I can do everything, I have this paradox of choice. I don't know what to do because I'm just a lawyer that's had my head down. I know that this AI, like, what can I do with this thing? When I was at TR, I was introduced to the product idea of an affordance, that you have to give the user an idea of what does this button do? Or what is this, what can I do with the system? So affordance is not in the blank box. You just have to experiment. And that experiment is costly in time, and with lawyers, costly in money. So lawyers don't want to experiment. They just want to know all the things they could do. So I wonder if, bringing it back to Comet, you don't have to decide what Instacart thing Comet does. It just goes out and finds an Instacart. I wonder if a similar thing would be for the LLM tools. Some things it uses ChatGD plus, some things it uses Perplexity, some things it uses Deep Judge, and you just have this omnibox of a browser-ish Comet-like thing that could be able to pick the tools. And then I think that this kind of relates to agents, where agents is in the eye of the beholder. People have many definitions for agent, one of which my friend and colleague Dan Hoadley says that if this agent can use tools to be able to achieve goals, he thinks the tool use is really what defines what an agent is. And I think I agree. And then there's another definition with Gunderson and Horace that I really like, that they say an agent can take multiple tasks and link them together dynamically. And I really like that one too. So I think somewhere in between is an agent. So I guess that is a long prelude to my question. I wonder if our agentic future is something like a Comet browser to be able to know dynamically which tools need to be done to be able to achieve which goals, whether those tools are internal or external.
100%. I could talk about this all day, every day. Like, since ChatGPT came out, I have so many spreadsheets of use cases and models. And like, every time a new version comes out, I try it, I compare it. What are the pros? What are the cons? What is the free version? What is the paid? What are the limitations? And I've sort of mapped out, and I thought it would be a static document. And I don't think it's ever stayed the same for more than like 3 days. But it's kind of like, if I want to brainstorm with a creative partner, what tool am I using? If I want to structure data, what tool am I using? And so really, I think refining all of that and like going through the experiment of learning that is like what makes you be able to work well with these models. But I think at the end of the day, it's our job in innovation and KN to help our attorneys figure that out in more of a condensed cheat sheet way, because they don't have as much time to experiment with every single tool. And so I see Joe and I and our team as that bridge between showing them what some of the possibilities are and then getting their feedback and iterating and then constantly changing and updating that list.
Yeah, and Damien, we're sort of already headed down that path. The capabilities, looking at things like Comet and ChatGPT has a browser that they're coming out with, Microsoft has one too. Like, this stuff is all coming. We have a proto version of how we're thinking about this working with something that we built within Deep Judge that we call Agentic Answers. So it's a workflow that basically you can ask it anything, any kind of question, right? It's meant to give, again, kind of more informational use cases, but it's connected to search indices for iManage, our knowledge repositories, which are in wikis within HiQ, and Perplexity. So it has information about each of those repositories and what they're good for, what kind of information is in it, all stuff that we produce. And then based on the question, it will come up with a research plan. It will ask questions to the user. So it uses the user as a tool. The user can also be a tool.
Literally and figuratively,
yeah. It asks the user some questions to clarify, lets the user modify the plan, and then goes off, does the searches, and then incorporates it all. And I think we'll get more and more where it just knows context protocol, MCP. This is, the direction we're heading, giving these models a whole bunch of different kinds of tools. We've played with this in Perplexity. Their labs feature allows, basically it's to write Python code, create visualizations, build websites. Like, there's a whole lot of things that these things can do when you give them access to tools. The reality is, though, is that we're going back to the beginning a little bit with some of these. Comment, for example, I'll be honest, I have a little bit of paralysis about what exactly to ask it to do. And I think paralysis was really, you give someone that Omni box, and for some people, they lean, Stephanie, she's in it. She's going to
Joe, I'll send you my spreadsheet after this.
You've got all the spreadsheets, right? But for many other people, either they tried once and they're disillusioned, or they were just paralyzed. It's too much choice. It's the omnivore's dilemma. I don't know what to do with this. And I think with agents, in the days where we're sort of working out to actually get it, like, yeah, it can produce a website. Is it the website that you wanted? Can you prompt your way to the website that you want? How long is it going to take you? Is there a bug at the end that you just can't fix and neither can it, and you don't have the technical skills to fix it? So all that time was wasted. This is the phase that we're in, right? Of just like, there's going to be a lot of experimentation. It's going to continue to do credible new things, but to like get it to like production grade, it works every time in a consistent way. People know how to use it and don't get paralyzed by like the endless possibilities. That's going to take some working through, I think.
I think that's right. Everybody needs a theater of the possible that Stephanie provides to you with that spreadsheet of all the use cases that you could do to kind of whet the mind. Horace and I have talked about this a lot, that we have three kinds of cognition. One is the ideation phase, and then the second is a curation phase, and the third is an extrapolation phase. And the ideation phase, the blank page problem, is quite hard. But once you can be able to get beyond the blank page, that is Stephanie's spreadsheet, all of a sudden you can curate and say, oh, I could do this and this and this and this. And then once you have that spreadsheet, you can extrapolate to be able to say, okay, now based on this, I could do these 12 other things that aren't on the spreadsheet. So I think what large language models and Stephanie's spreadsheet does is gets us past the ideation phase to give us a theater of the possible to do things. That was a long wind up to a question. As I listen to you and the cool things you're doing within Gunderson, you are at truly the top 1% of law firms that are doing things. And I say that honestly and not hyperbole. I think that 100 law firms out there, you are 1 in 100. I could imagine that those other 99 have a very low risk tolerance. They could say, if we jump into this, there's a risk of confidentiality, bias, hallucinations, right? All of these things keep them from jumping in. So there's the risk of jumping in. There's also the risk of not jumping in. And Gunderson seems pretty clearly to say that the risk of jumping in is far less than the risk of not jumping in. The risk of not jumping in is losing revenue, losing clients, because they're just not doing things the way they should. What is your advice to your counterparts in those 99 other law firms that have less forward-thinking firms? What's your advice to them to get them to your 1%?
I thought a lot about this in 2023, and I did extensive research on this, and I sort of accidentally wrote a law review on this very topic that Berkeley published last year, and it's called Why Lawyers Must Responsibly Use AI. I think there's so many risks of just sticking your head in the sand and pretending this isn't happening and that this isn't all changing. And I think the risk of shadow AI and employees getting their hands on this anyways, you have to be realistic about how people are going to get their work done now that these tools are out here. So that paired with the fact that as lawyers, we have a professional obligation to be competent with the technology as it continues to evolve. So I felt strongly that there was a way to do it that fulfilled that obligation. And then also we could mitigate the risk enough that our risk management would feel comfortable with it and we could get the benefits.
Yeah, that's awesome. So a takeaway is that everyone read that Berkeley article, please.
Yeah, it's great. Our balancing of those competing diametrically opposed positions is calibrated to our client base. That's a big factor in this. Our clients build SaaS, cloud-based software. They understand how it works. They understand what the risks are.
Yeah.
And, also tend to have kind of a risk-on attitude to life. VCs and startups, there's a huge risk component to it. And they're very pro-technology. We have a lot of tailwinds that have helped us to experiment, which many other firms I know struggle with because I talk to people in similar positions at other firms. And in many cases, their clients don't really understand the technology, are taking a very slow and measured, in some cases, glacial approach. But even with some of those very large institutions, that same diametrically opposed dynamic that you were describing, Damien, is happening with the same client. Here's the RFP where we're asking you, how are you using AI to make our build less and be more efficient and get work done faster and all the things. Here's the same company's outside counsel guidelines that say you may not use AI, period. Not generative AI, like spell check. That's law circa 1995, right? That's what many organizations are working with. And the people who are passing that OGC or procurement stuff over to their law firms. And they have to have that conversation. And they're having that conversation with people in those organizations, frankly, who are not empowered to be very thoughtful about it or to change those requirements. Those are handed down from on high. That's a huge impediment. Many law firms see the business imperative of moving on this and are struggling with how to work through that with their clients, which honestly I think is hopefully a time-limited thing, because this technology is going to be so pervasive and so part of everyone's life that once people understand it a little bit better. The conversation that we had internally about ChatGPT, and one of the ways that we got comfortable is that there's very little that was unique about generative AI compared to any free cloud-based software. If you're using it for free, chances are you and your data are the product, similar to running Google searches, right? We had to train our attorneys not to put confidential information into Google. And this is the same thing, effectively. There were other parts of generative AI that were much more unique in that it's very convincing, that it seems like it really knows what it's talking about, and you should trust that it actually knows what it's talking about and that it's correct. That was, I think, the harder risk management problem that we dealt with through training and giving people, again, early sandbox access in line with some policies and guidelines around how to use it.
I wonder if those outside counsel guidelines that you mentioned earlier are going to not stand the test of time, much like the judge's standing orders are not going to stand the test of time. Tell me how you use AI is stupid, because I'll say, okay, cool, I used Grammarly and I used spell check and I used it to ideate these 100 things.
Yeah.
Here are the 50 pages worth of ways that I use generative AI, right? I'm clear to anyone with eyes and a brain that it is not clear to the judges and to those writing the outside counsel guidelines. But I think you're right that this is a point in time that will pass.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the, like, if you're a partner on the brief and an associate drafts something for you to review, you have an obligation to verify it and make sure that it's accurate. That's your job as the senior attorney on the case. You have to do
Like
that.
you
So I
always
think
have.
it's the same.
Yep.
Exactly. Like, I think that Gen AI gets vilified in a sense sometimes, but at the end of the day, it is really a tool. And I think it can be addressed through the training and education as long as you're open to learning about it, and we can adapt and make it really useful in our workflow.
So that's the landscape around clients and their sort of demands on what you can and can't use and all the rules that you have to kind of work by. Let me ask you another hard question, which is, in this landscape right now where people used to talk about build versus buy, and we can see your journey from build to buying. And the noisiness in this landscape of so many different vendors selling you pretty much the same things. How are you going about thinking of what is the portfolio of technologies you're going to need, and what's the process around selection?
Ooh, that's a question.
Well,
Hard question.
I can start. I'll say the first part, which will be easy. Joe, you can brainstorm while I'm doing this. The most important thing is you need to listen to your attorneys. And that sounds very easy, but it's actually hard to do in practice, because I think right now, more than ever, people get distracted by these shiny tools and they want to do something really cool and they want the tool that can do everything. But do your attorneys want that, right? Like, do your professionals want the tool? And is it solving a problem? Like, is there a pain point that it's addressing, or does it just look cool and it does some cool fancy stuff? So I think it just goes back to listen to what your attorneys and your staff want, what makes their lives easier. And then you look at the tools from there. You shouldn't be starting with the tools and trying to fit it into some puzzle piece.
Our philosophy around our tech stack and how it shakes out, despite having the capabilities to build things in-house from scratch or for more custom development or building on no-code, low-code tools, both of which we do quite a lot of, our preference is to buy software that's well supported and has market incentives to continue developing and do all the things if it solves the problem that we're looking to solve at a price that we're willing to pay. Every decision we make is looking at the tools that we have in the toolbox to see how we can solve a problem and then going to market when we need to. So we actually moved from build in part because there were not many solutions at the time and they were very expensive, and it was a brand new product category where it wasn't very clear how people were going to find value out of it and whether they would, and all of that sort of stuff. But we still have solutions that we've built kind of custom in-house because we haven't been able to find something that works the way that we needed to. With other things like Deep Judge, we bought the Deep Judge platform, but we've invested quite a lot of time in building workflows on that platform using our subject matter expertise and our technical skills to do that. So it's a blend. Buy versus build, it's not really a dichotomy. It's there's a lot in between. And one of the things that I'm personally struggling with in the market right now is with the influx of VC money into the space, which, has been great. Many of our clients are very interested in our worlds, and I get to talk to all of them about it. Many companies are growing very rapidly and trying to attack bigger and bigger markets. And it's led to a number of products that we've bought with a specific intention and a specific value proposition, building more functionality that overlaps with other products that we have. And that's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself, but it could potentially create a lot of user confusion because they're like, well, these all seem like they do the same thing. What am I supposed to use for what? So that's a challenge. And then we can't afford to pay all of them for all of the offerings as a platform and have so many. As the market shakes out and develops, that's an increasingly challenging thing to navigate when you sit in my seat thinking about our tech strategy and what we need to have.
That's absolutely right. Knowing we're nearing our end of time, there's build, there's buy, and then there's the third that always points out is rent. Build versus buy versus rent. Most of what we're buying is software as a service, which is truly renting, right? We're not buying a static thing. We're renting so that you get all the improvements that you talked about. And of course, connecting that with your VC discussion, private equity loves annual recurring revenue. And right, so ARR, you need to rent to get that ARR going. That's thing number one. And if you rent, maybe there's a lower switching cost. You start renting from one and then you switch the rent to the next. And so I think those are all dynamics. Knowing we have 2 minutes left in our discussion, we like to close by asking, what are you optimistic about? I'll start with myself to give you all time to think. I'm really optimistic about Stephanie's spreadsheet, and I'm really optimistic about Stephanie's law review article that I hope everybody goes and reads to show a bright shining light on what those 99% of the law firms should be doing. So that's my optimism. Horace, what's yours?
My optimism is much more specific, and that is I'm optimistic about what Comet is going to be doing to change user behavior. Haven't used it myself yet, but I'm excited by the description you guys have made. Stephanie, please.
Yeah, I think I'm excited just for the future in general and how it's going to change almost everything in every industry. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I think about what their future will look like and will they go to college? And they've both assured me that it's okay, Mom, we're going to both be in the NBA, so it doesn't matter. But assuming that doesn't work out and they need a backup plan, I think it's cool that they're already interacting with these tools. They use the voice mode on ChatGPT, and my 9-year-old particularly loves to ask basketball stats. He'll want to know who's the tallest person on this team and how many rebounds did they have this game. And they just talk back and forth and it's natural for him. So I'm excited to see how they grow up with some of these tools and just what the future looks like for them.
I'm happy to hear they're going to have a lot of job security, Stephanie, because I don't think agentic basketball is catching on anytime soon.
Yeah, not yet.
Rock'em sock'em basketball.
The increase in the pace of change of technology is happening so quickly that it's just bringing so many things that when I started in this role, when I came back to Gunderson, thinking about how law firms could do things differently, there's just a whole new world of capabilities that honestly, I didn't imagine that we'd be able to attempt solutions for anytime this soon. That's the thing for me that I'm most optimistic about. The legal industry, as someone who spent some time in the trenches, as did you all, there's a lot of drudgery. There's a lot of misery. There's a lot of things that I was like, why did I go to law school to do this? Make signature page packets and do it at 4 a.m. So the more of that becomes things that we can kind of cut out of the system and not require human beings to do, that human beings really have no business doing and don't want to be doing, I'm optimistic about that.
Our friend Casey Flaherty says, we as lawyers do a lot of thinking and we do a lot of thunking. That is a lot of drudgery, and the AI will do that thunking for us, leaving us just thinking. So I think that's maybe a great way to close. Thank you so much about helping our audience think about how the thinking could be made better and the thunking could be gone away. Joe Green and Stephanie Goutos, really thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for spending the time with us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
This is great.
Love you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.